Hello and welcome to the Tonearm, where we connect you with the people and ideas moving culture forward. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. We're putting the Tonearm's needle on Julianna Barwick and Mary Lattimore. Julianna is a composer, vocalist, and producer whose music is built almost entirely from layered, looped human voice. Mary is a harpist who spent years pushing that instrument into a vast exploratory realm. In January 2025, the two flew to Paris just days after the LA wildfires tore through their community. In Paris, they spent 9 days recording with instruments pulled from a museum, harps dating back to 1728, vintage analog synthesizers. The result is Tragic Magic out on InFiné, and it's one of the most talked about creative music records of the year so far. In just a few days, the pair heads back to Paris to perform these songs live on those very same instruments. We caught them as they were preparing for the trip. Welcome to the Tonearm, Julianna Barwick and Mary Lattimore. I wanted to start by asking you about the conditions that you sort of arrived to the sessions in, leaving Los Angeles in the set of circumstances that you did immediately following the fire. I'm wondering how you both arrived in Paris, what you showed up with emotionally, interpersonally. And Mary, you look like you're bursting at the seams.
I would say a lot of gratitude for the opportunity to just get out, a city that had been so terrifying the weeks before. Gratitude about this opportunity that was being offered, and really glad that I could be there with Julianna and we could both kind of process together. And, a lot of the music that I think we both make comes from our heart and how we feel and stuff. So like giving the opportunity to be able to process that through music in a crazy, gorgeous city was something to be really grateful for. There was also some guilt about leaving such a place that had been so traumatized and going off to Paris also. I feel like Julianna and I talked about that some too. It's like you feel very privileged, and with that addressing of privilege also comes with like not everybody gets to do this, and there's like a little guilt there in leaving so soon after such a disaster has happened.
Julianna, how about you?
Same. We flew to Paris on the 25th, so it was shortly after everything happened here. So it was a mixed bag for sure, like complete and total elation. Mary and I had for probably 10 years dreamt of making a duo record. This was just an unbelievable opportunity for us, but we were making our way to Paris with really heavy hearts, for sure.
A lot of processing. It was heavy. It was a heavy trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So you have that in the air for the two of you. I think the next thing I'm really curious about, and I guess it's a little bit of like inside the making of the record. I promise not to get too deconstructionist with you, but I'm curious about, I love to talk to artists about space and about place and how it affects their work. And I'm really curious about the role of Paris, the role of the rooms you recorded in, and even more special on this album is the role of the instruments. So maybe we could start with location and place. Again, I'll start with you, Mary. Like, tell me about Paris and tell me about the actual rooms you were in.
I would say the rooms were in the basement of the Philharmonie and the Museum of Musical Instruments. The rooms themselves were unremarkable. One was more like a storage room that we started out in until the bigger room was available. And that was like a rehearsal room with no windows. There was a beautiful grand piano. The rooms themselves felt very utilitarian, but the potential, in such an ornate place and the crazy architectural gem of the Philharmonie, these rooms felt very like, okay, this is where the work happens behind the scenes. And it was fun to get to know the behind the scenes. I always like behind the scenes, the secret little twisty hallways and the coffee machine where you go when you go to work there, just the behind the scenes stuff is always fun to get a little glimpse into. But, the potential that these kind of nondescript rooms had to hold this creative kind of laboratory for us was amazing. The instruments themselves, they couldn't go very far. So the curator had to deliver them down the elevator and be very, very delicate with them, because they came straight from the exhibit of all the instruments. You know, there were little signs where the instruments were in the museum that said, sorry, you can't view this harp because it is on loan to Mary, who is making music with Julianna. You know,
Wow.
it's kind of cool. It was kind of cool that we were seen as, wow, they're important enough to like put this little card there. Sorry, you can't see this. You know, it was really cool. Once in a lifetime, man.
It's really funny because hearing you talk about the unremarkable nature of the spaces, I was thinking to myself, you know, something about like a utility closet in Paris is still more romantic than
I know,
than maybe a concert hall in other places.
Yeah. But you know, gray walls and like very like conference room vibes a little bit.
Yeah.
It was kind of within the bigger picture of Paris, the most beautiful city on earth.
Yeah. Julianna, could you tell me about the instrument selection? That was something I didn't really gather as I was listening to the album and reading some of the material. Did you stroll through the collection and pick items, and did items call out to you? Like, I don't mean to overlay some kind of mystic element to it, but I'm really curious about the actual instrument selection.
Yeah, I mean, we were sent a list of available instruments to choose from. Since I'm a vocalist and the only thing I really know how to play outside of my own voice is keys. So, of course, I was looking at what keyboards were available. So, you know, I chose the Jupiter and the Prophet. I did say I would have loved to play the harpsichord, and that didn't end up happening. And once I saw it in person, I understood why, because every square millimeter of it was painted in this beautiful pastoral oil painting from who knows what century. So I kind of understood why maybe that one didn't get prepared for me, but that's how I picked the keyboards. And also just because I have no experience with Jupiters or Prophets. So I thought, hey, might as well, you know, learn something new also. I did choose the vocoder also because I could do stuff with my voice for that.
Yeah, that seems like a natural.
Yeah, but, you know, with Mary, she got to choose from some very special harps, which were amazing.
Yeah, I would like to hear about that because it's interesting when I think about the choice of a synthesizer or a keyboard instrument. You can approach it with an idea of kind of, oh, I know what that's going to sound like, or I know what it's capable of. But I'm curious what's the analog there with a multi-century-old harp? Like, how do you know what you're going to use?
I chose based on just the playability of them, frankly. It didn't really feel like, oh, I'm choosing this harp because it's my favorite. I felt like I was choosing it because it was the closest one to what I play now, which I thought where I'd be able to express kind of the music that Julianna and I make, but give it the voice of something from the 1800s, kind of a merging of the centuries together. You know, some of the harps that were offered were in a condition that wasn't playable, frankly. It was like the tension of the strings was really off. The tuning was really off. So that meant that it couldn't be merged with a more modern instrument because it wouldn't be it would be rubbing against it. I basically picked the harps that I felt could be translated into this modern voice pretty easily with the time constraint that we had. We did use the double strung chromatic harp that was like, the strings are like this. Very fascinating instrument. We used the tuning bells. There were little tuning bells above each string that you pressed on, and a little chime would indicate how it should be tuned.
Wow.
So we used those tuning bells. Our engineer, Trevor, included those into the Stardust piece.
Yeah. You know, there are a few of the tracks I want to ask you about, and I was going to get to it a little later, but you brought up Stardust and you brought up Trevor. Stardust was the first piece I heard from the record before I even knew I was going to have the opportunity to speak with you both. You know, it grabbed me by the proverbial lapels and and really pulled me in. I was actually just listening to a playlist of music as I was working or reading or something, and it was one of those tracks where I was like, what's going on there? Can you tell me any tales of that piece, of the recording of it or the composition of it? And I'm really curious about how deep the collaboration with Trevor was, because just that little anecdote you gave me around, you know, the decision to record the bells, that's not just engineering. right? There's some creative input and thought there. So if either of you want to chime in on that particular track, I'd love to hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Stardust came together like maybe the third or fourth day, because the first week we were in the kind of more like, it almost felt like a store room. And the second week we're like behind a big stage with the grand piano and everything. So it was one of the first ones we kind of worked out, but it was Mary and I went with like a handful of demos and a couple things that we already had worked out. You know, we had covered Rachel's song from Blade Runner previously. You know, we came with the song that Roger Eno wrote, but there were just a few things that happened in kind of real time there. And that was just born out of me messing around with the Jupiter, wanting at least one of the tracks on the record to kind of highlight this cool synthesizer, you know? And the chord progression is just a chord progression I've loved since high school. I think it might exist in some of my other songs somewhere. I've always loved it. It's kind of the first thing I will play on a keyboard. So the songs that were made in real time there, you know, are just kind of like exploring the instruments. And so, yeah, we hit record, and then Mary was like, I just want to add harps like millions of glittering stars all over this, which I thought was a really beautiful thing to say. And she did. That's kind of how we got there. We ended up putting that drum machine, the beat in, and finally adding the vocoder vocals a little bit later. But it all just kind of like came together over a few days.
Was everything that's on the album recorded there, or was there post work done?
Yeah, everything was
recorded.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Before we stay in the present, I want to go back to the past just for a moment. And I'm curious, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, that you didn't necessarily, and I hope I'm describing this properly, you didn't necessarily like fall head over heels in love with the harp initially. Like it took you time to really connect. And if I'm right about that, or if I'm saying it correctly, when did it become your sort of musical voice? Like what, was there an epiphany? Was there an evolution? Could you talk about that a little bit?
It's so funny because in doing this podcast, you asked to have my Wikipedia included in the form. And I read my Wikipedia for the first time in a really long time. And it said something about me not initially connecting with wanting to play. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope my mom doesn't read my Wikipedia. My mom is a harpist, and she,
oh no,
it's true. It's true. It's true. Wikipedia is correct in that, you know, when you're a child, you don't necessarily want to practice all the time. I started playing the harp when I was 11. I had a pretty strict classical background. It's very tedious to sit down and play scales. And the way that you learn the harp in general is one finger at a time. So you do like a year of learning the pointer finger and the thumb, and just a lot of training as far as technique. And so I think like that, and having my mom be a harpist, and it felt normal to me in my life. It wasn't like, oh, the harp, it's so magical. I'm like, the harp is my mom's job. The harp is something that's in the house a lot. And that is a privilege. But then when I started to get better at it, the more I started to play like Frenchy, Debussy, or some kind of beautiful cadenza and kind of have it click after studying it for 6 months or something like that, it started to get really fun. And then you kind of see the difference between like the small nuances that you can make in classical music, where you can make something really sound your own, at your own tone, and add your own emotions to these pieces that have been played for so long. I think that's when it started to feel like my voice, rather than something I was just like studying or learning how to do because of my mom.
Do you happen to know, has the pedagogy or the methodology around instruction changed? And I asked that specifically because I talked to a lot of artists, specifically piano players. When I was a kid, I had like that sort of classic, kind of a mean older lady piano teacher. And I wasn't even really, for like the first year, I wasn't allowed to touch the instrument. I had to write notes in the theory book. Like, it was the worst thing you could do to a 5 or 6 year old.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
it took me years to actually want to play the instrument. Whereas my son, my oldest son, when he started taking piano lessons, they put him at a piano. And then the next lesson, they put him at a drum. And then, and it was about playing. I'm curious, has the harp evolved?
I like teaching the harp. I don't know. I think some of that pedagogy, some of that technique, learning foundation is to avoid injury.
Oh.
Like a lot of that stuff is, you need to build the strength very deliberately in order to be able to have the stamina to play. I think that a lot of that is to just to build up muscles.
Fair.
Maybe the strictness or something. I'm sure there have been changes in the education of the instrument, and there's a lot of different ways to do it probably. But I would say you still have to go slow and not just immediately start with all the fingers playing.
I can attest to that, because one time I sat down at Mary's harp and just was playing and playing and playing, and I had blisters on my fingers, kind of
very
immediately. Yeah.
That's really funny you say that, because I couldn't imagine being around a harp that way and not wanting to fiddle with it. Like,
totally.
I'm glad you did that. And I'm sorry that it hurt your fingers.
It's irresistible. It's an irresistible object.
Was it easy to make a noise out of it that sounded interesting? Or was it like, when you approached it as a non-player of it, could you make it do anything?
Sure. I mean, my brain was like, oh, this is kind of like playing a piano, because it's the notes of an octave, And I was like, if I play every other one, that's like, harmony. But any understanding outside of that was beyond my grasp.
Yeah.
Well, I have a similar question for you. You said it very plainly earlier that your primary instrument is your voice, yet you approach it in a very interesting, you use your instrument in a very interesting way. And I wonder, could you tell me a little bit about that journey of discovery to your looping and layer, the treatment aspect of how you use your instrument, how you stumbled across that, what intention you had in that, like just a little bit of context about your approach.
Sure. I mean, I grew up singing every which way. I just sang all the time. I found reverberant spaces as a child and would sing and make myself cry just singing in, a parking garage or whatever. I just always loved to sing. My mom was always singing. She's a beautiful singer. I was always in choirs throughout school, sang in church with the congregation as a cappella in these reverberant spaces. So my brain was constantly being informed by singing and the effect the space it's in has on it, the way it sounds. In high school, I took voice lessons. I was in an opera chorus after high school. Had a little Fostex 4-track recorder. ended up with some effects pedals that I would put my voice through or this electric guitar through. And I was just like finding my way and trying to figure out what kind of music I could make that didn't just sound like trying to be somebody else. And one of my best friends showed me like a Digitech digital delay pedal that's meant for guitar, I think. But he showed me that if you held the pedal down, it would loop. And that just ignited something in my brain. And I was like, I have to borrow that, and took it home and just made millions of loops, just experimenting. Everything clicked. I could compose just in the moment, start a loop, not knowing where it would go, and just kind of like sitting at the end, like, where did that come from? So it just fit my like musical constitution perfectly, and still does. Yeah.
It seems like there's also a bit of an analog to having grown up singing in church with other voices. Like there's a element of hearing your voice in the context of many voices.
Totally.
And being able to do that on your own is kind of fascinating.
Totally. I mean, I sang in choirs, starting in like 3rd grade in school. And then my whole life going to church 3 times a week, hearing like rounds and hearing the sopranos, altos, the tenors, the bass, the baritone, all the different parts, like the men singing this and the women singing this, and the harmonies, and like I said, the rounds, and even the clapping and everything. I could hear all the layers. So once I figured out how to loop my voice, it was so fun to harmonize with myself. And it just be instant, with looping, you put one layer down and then you can add onto it and harmonize with yourself and add beats and whatever you want, Yeah. And I also had a lot of fun then, and I still do, using my voice in different ways and timbres, like sometimes making it really soft and other times making it like honky or brassy, I just like having fun playing with my voice, kind of like a palette or something.
Before we leave the topic of your voice and how you use it, tell me a little bit about some of the vocal decisions you made for Melted Moon, because that piece feels so vulnerable. Your voice is a big part of that, and it's a bit more naked or less treated. I wouldn't call it I mean, there's still a lot of ambience and reverberation, but it's you. Mm-hmm. What is it like to strip away a little bit of that? Is vulnerability the right way to think about it, or are you just responding to what the song needs?
All of that. It's a little bit uncomfortable, I mean, I've always used tons of washes of reverb and or delay to kind of just make a hazy curtain of sound. And that's the kind of thing that helps out if you kind of like hit a semi-wrong note or something, you just kind of wash over it with everything. And most of my music individually has been pretty much wordless. And most of the lyrics were sung on the spot, like improvising, playing around. Some of the lyrics on my previous records kind of just sound like someone talking in their sleep or something. It's just, it's just like whatever kind of came to my head as I was doing it. But with this project, there was this unique opportunity. There was a novelty, and there was like a reverence that really needed to happen. I didn't want to just wash everything, I wanted to make the kind of uncomfortable decision to honor the opportunity in a way by making it stripped down, making it kind of timeless for a few of those songs. I mean, with the looping, that's here and now, but like with Perpetual Adoration and with Melted Moon, I kind of wanted it to be like, what century is this from? And also stretching a very weak muscle that is lyrics writing, which is not something that I normally do. So it was definitely very different from what I'm used to doing, what I'm comfortable doing. But I felt like this project needed that.
How do you feel about it, revisiting it or listening back on it?
I love it. And Mary and I just got done with West Coast tour was the first kind of like tour we've done with the record. I love singing those songs. But it is a new thing for me. It's really new. So is talking from stage. I'm doing a whole new thing with this record.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nira, you've used the word privilege a couple of times already now. I think an adjacent question about the privilege of some of the instruments. I'm curious about the harp you used and the selection of the actual piece of the Rogerino piece of Temple of the Winds. My understanding is that it was a particularly like old and rare instrument, or at least old instrument, potentially rare.
Yeah.
Tell me about that song, that pairing, and like what's the responsibility that comes with the privilege of handling that object?
I mean, it's terrifying. It was really scary to be entrusted with the tuning of that instrument and playing of that instrument. We knew that we wanted to feature it somewhere on the record, and handling it and looping it and stuff and like, using it every day didn't feel right. But with this song, it felt like the proper way to honor it, just because, that harp was not affected. We just heard the natural sound of that early pedal harp from 1740. It was extremely delicate. Trevor had to hold it on my shoulder, like literally hold it so that it didn't just fall off. It was light as a feather. The strings were very close together. The tension was really different than my harp. So this piece, Roger wrote this for us after we met him in Australia. We had a really fun lunch together. We were all playing the same show later on that night, but we had a really fun lunch together and got along really well. And then he went to a park by himself and he wrote us this piece and he presented it to us at the concert. And he's like, "You guys, I just wrote you a piece this afternoon called Temple of the Winds." So we had kind of been saving it for the perfect moment to record it. And I think when I heard the timbre of this harp, I was like, okay, this would be a good one to use for this song. And the song was very tricky, as far as the notes go. It sounds really simple, but it was pretty hard to learn. We wanted to do it in one take, no cutting and pasting or punching in. We wanted to just do it, play it twice through. And so it took a lot of time and practice to get it just right, especially using this very unfamiliar instrument.
That's such a beautiful offering to have someone respond to time spent with you to come back with a composition.
Roger is a really cool person. He's really funny. He's really amazingly talented, and really feel like it was destiny that we got to meet him that time.
Funny and talented seems to be an Eno family trait. Seem to be two Eno family traits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about Rachel's song. I mean, there's a lot in there, or in your collaborative presentation of it. The field recording of the rain, which I would love to have you describe as opposed to me recite something from the press material. The themes of the song, or how it's used in Blade Runner. So there's a lot of weight in that composition. I wonder if either or both of you might want to tell me a little bit about what that song means to you.
I mean, the rain sample came from when our friend Rachel, just a coincidence, Pony is her nickname. She's our great friend. She took all the press photos for us too, but we were chatting, and she lives in LA, and she's like, it started raining. It just started raining the first time in 8 months, the first time after the fires. And we were like, please go outside and send us a recording of it. We want to hear it. We want to be able to experience the kind of relief with the rest of our city. And so we listened to it, and we were like, oh man, maybe we should slow this down a little bit and include it in the recording. I mean, the recording a lot, in totality feels like a time capsule, or like it holds all the memories of that time in our lives and that experience. And so we wanted to include that that moment, that very important moment with all the other little like things that we had collected in that recording period.
Julianna, that's such a fascinating response to, or an impulse to say, please record it. Like we want to experience it. I don't know if I have a question around that. It's just striking to me that that's the impulsive response. Like, what's that about?
Well, that's all Mary. I remember asked Pony to do that. But, that just goes to show how we were so enthralled with Paris and our experience at the Philharmonie, but our hearts were very much back in LA. To hear that it was raining there was just, there were moments of us just crying off and on throughout this whole recording process, and that just hearing that it was raining there, was very deeply emotional. I put that recording into my sampler, so we've been playing it live, and it's just so wild. That is the actual first rainfall after what happened to our city. And it's on the record, and it's there whenever we play it live. It's really a cool amalgamation of all of those elements. And, with Rachel's song, I think Mary, mentioned a few years ago, I would love to hear you sing this song. And so we worked it out to play live. I think the first time we did it was either at Making Time or at Zebulon, January 2024 it would have been. So we played it a couple times, just to work in the prophet into it. And Mary's harp just sounded just perfect in there, and had the chimes, and it just kind of all came together perfectly. And even the horrifying vocals at the end were, I just kind of pressed every button on my effects pedal, and that's how we arrived there.
Could you tell me a little bit from your individual perspectives about this collaboration, whether it's the bond you have as artists or interpersonally, when you realized there was something between you? And I'm also curious about, it's a bit of an ephemeral notion, but does the chemistry have to be cultivated and tended to, or you get together and it's there, if that makes any sense?
It's both. I mean, for me, it's both. Just as meeting each other for the first time, it's like we kind of make hard to categorize one person looping layered music with our perspective instruments, like Mary with her harp, me with my voice. And so we had that camaraderie from day one. And then it just so happens that we're like two tall ladies from the South and, like the same things, a lot of the same things. And then, we played our first set of shows together was late 2016. We played 11 shows in 11 days and barely knew each other. And it was just awesome. There's just always been kind of a sisterhood in all ways. Mary lived in Philly for 13 years. I lived in New York for 16 years. There's just so many similarities and kind of through lines.
Yeah, even talking about both of our moms.
Yes.
We play the same instruments as our moms.
Yes.
Kind of. That's another similarity where we kind of grew up with these instruments.
Yeah.
And grew up going to church. So many things in common, similar philosophies about music making and life and
definitely. Definitely. Through the years, we've done all kinds of things together. We've toured together. We've played runs of shows where we would improv at the end. We have DJ'd together. We've guested on each other's records, that kind of thing. But through the years, people that like our music would say, you guys should make a record together. And we're like, we know, we want to. And then so for that opportunity to come in this package was just kind of ridiculous. And in Paris, which I'm pretty sure is each of our favorite city. Yeah, it was just kind of like unreal. And it still is. I mean, after the fact, people would ask me like, so how was Paris? And I said, it was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. Yeah, we've been having fun. And now we've done our first run of shows and it was awesome. So awesome. Yeah.
There's something I've been really excited to talk to you both about. That's James Turrell.
Yeah.
I lived in New York for around 20 years, and I was fortunate enough to see when he did the installations in, New York, LA, and didn't he do one in Texas at the same time, I think. But I saw Lattimore and I saw the Guggenheim.
Oh, cool.
Just I actually think about those experiences quite often. There's such a natural connection between sort of light art and the types of sounds artists like you make. What does his work do to you, and how does it connect to you as artists? How do you refract that light back?
I feel like I first discovered him around the Guggenheim show. Personally, I read the review of that show in the New Yorker, and I really loved the way that his work was described by that writer. Luminous. There were words that I remember, ravishing beauty. There are words that I remember reading and like, oh my gosh, I must see this ravishing beauty. I must see this work. I'd never heard of him in my life. And I rode the bus up to New York to go see it. And my brain was blown open. And personally, for me, I feel like I kind of do some Turrell tourism.
Wow.
Like I went to Japan to Naoshima to see couple of his works there on this island in Japan, and Villa Panza in Italy. And I feel like that's like Julianna appreciates his work just as much as I do. And we had the honor of opening his new Sky Space, his newest at the time, at Mass Mocha. We played for the opening of that, and he was there.
Wow.
And it was just so wild. I think people ask like, Mary, what's your dream show? What's your biggest dream that you have? And I'm always like, playing the Crater would be the dream. Playing the opening of the Crater, playing in the Crater period would be it would be a life highlight if that ever could happen. But yeah.
Did you go to the crater?
Never. No. Is the crater open? Can you go to the crater? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how it works, but I feel like some people get to
Kanye?
Yeah,
I feel like Kanye.
exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping you were going to say when you were with him at Mass Mocha, he said, why don't we all go back to my place at some point and go to the crater? Yeah.
Oh my God. Did not talk to him. He's like, yeah, it would be scary.
I was going to
Just
say
scared to
that.
talk to him.
Yeah.
It was something I find very compelling about his work is the way it reproduces in photographs. It's really stunning to me to see a piece and then to go see it in person. And it's like, that's it. Wow. And I don't know why I'm always so surprised about it. I guess because it's light art, I just expect to be disappointed in person when I see it photographed so stunningly. And it's not. Like, you're instantly in a different universe.
You feel it. You don't see it. You feel it. It really.
Yeah, I mean, you're a part of it. I mean, I remember like just being a kid and like looking out the window. There's beautiful sun with the, like yellow leaves falling, and just like not wanting to just see it, but I wanted to get out of the car and be a part of it. And with his work, you really are. You're within it. You're in that spongy color. You're experiencing something. It's just so different than looking at a painting. You actually walk upstairs and you're in a piece. Not every time, obviously, but like it is something else to be in a space with the art and trying to see like where one surface ends and begins. And it's just so fun for the brain, and it's so beautiful to your eyes.
And the crisp lines that demarcate the boundaries of the light and the shadow. It's so stunning.
How does it work? Yeah, it's biology. It's like, it's science.
Yeah.
It's magic. It's science. It's magic.
Yeah. You know, there's math at work somewhere.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, something that I very much appreciate about the two of you, outside the music itself, is that you didn't really indulge my attempt to get too mystical about the space and the instruments, and because that could have been a whole rabbit hole that I definitely would have gone down. And I appreciate the very craftsperson-like approach that you've both articulated here. If I can drag you back into that muck for 1 second, something that strikes me about this work is that because of the instruments and just frankly, the age of them, not only the harps, but these classic synthesizers and the space that houses them, they have narratives, they have stories, they have histories, and now you've contributed to their stories. And I would imagine some of these objects, their stories hadn't been added onto in a while. Is there any resonance in that for you, or am I just, am I putting you back in a place where you don't want to be? Or
no,
how might you comment on that?
It's beautiful the way you put it, and yeah, you definitely always feel like this is a living thing. This is a living, breathing thing. This instrument, they're meant to be played. I feel like they enjoy being played.
Oh.
Our head of our label, Alex from InFiné, was like, "You're waking up the sleeping princesses," and we named a song after that because that was just so beautiful. It does feel like we're waking up these instruments and saying, come join us here in the future. Come with us. Like, we're bringing you to a new chapter, a little gem of a moment. Join us. Let's do it. And we are going to play these instruments live again in April. We have 3 sets to be played at the museum April 10th, where we're going to have to readjust back to these instruments, and we'll be communicating with them once again.
April in Paris. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, Julianne, you actually put electricity through them, right? Like, they're actually sleeping, and then you wake them up. It's barely metaphorical.
Yeah, gotta have electricity. Yeah, you gotta have it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. Even the harps are acoustic instruments, but I feel like those synths, they want to be played too. They don't want to just sit on the shelf. And I definitely have like semi-emotional connections with the instruments that I use, and they're all machines. I love following my nose and figuring out what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
So it was really fun.
There's something very interesting about the period of analog synthesizers. I try not to fetishize analog versus digital, or everything has its place and people have their tastes, and, who am I? But I have observed in my conversations with multiple artists, as well as in some of the music that people return to repeatedly, that specific era, let's just call it early mid-70s to early 80s synthesizers in particular, before they went fully digital, there's something about that sound that seems to reverberate somatically for people. Mm-hmm. That music is sort of hard to ignore because there is still that analog gruffness involved. And again, who knows, but that feels true to me.
I'm no expert, but I mean, just the way you said that, it just, I'm a photo major. That's what I did in school.
Oh, so
And so it's just the way I think about like film versus digital. There are things that you can capture, nuances you can capture with film that just cannot be duplicated digitally. It just doesn't work. There's some timbre, some softness, something that can't be reproduced. So I can totally see what you're saying when I compare it to that, for sure.
Thank you for tuning into the Tonearm. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out the nearly 300 episodes available in our free archive at thetonearm.com. While you're there, join our mailing list or consider becoming a paid supporter. The Tonearm is executive produced and hosted by me, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and marketed by Michael Donaldson. Editing and sound design is by Terry Grant. Our theme music is by Birdie, spelled B-U-R-D-Y. Thank you so much for listening. Be safe and stay in touch.
After listening to this episode, head to thetonearm.com, our online journal covering unexpected music and culture. Right now on the Tonearm, you'll find features on legendary Zombies vocalist Colin Blunstone, wilderness channeling string player Isabel Pine, soulful London Afro-jazz combo Nubian Twist, ecologically minded electronic music duo Greenhouse, and so much more. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter, Talk of the Tonearm. That's thetonearm.com. The Tonearm, putting a needle on the cultural wax.